Hello everyone and welcome back to Dancing with Damage. I'm Ian, your resident philosopher.
And I'm Abby, your resident author.
And today we talk about celebrities. Who are they really?
And why do we care?
Good questions. We are on episode 43. And Abby, I took the liberty of looking up the word celebrity on the internets before we started this
discussion.
This discussion. That's well said. And can you guess what the word celebrity means in Latin?
Oh my gosh, no. I thought you were going to say in English in the dictionary, and I had some ideas, but not in Latin, no.
So in Latin, if I'm recalling correctly, celebritas meant to be like crowded in the street. So you would like walk through the street and people would crowd you.
Oh.
And so that's kind of the idea of it, is someone who's so well known that if they were to go out, they would
Be swarmed?
be swarmed.
I mean, it's a fair definition. Latin.
Who knew?
Who knew?
We didn't. So another thing I looked up was, we are in Canada. Are we in Canada?
Yes.
Can you confirm?
Actually, I don't know if I can add it into the video. I was walking around the property earlier and there was one lone Canadian goose standing in the middle of the still frozen lake, just looking so angry. I think his friends were like, meet you there at 2 or whatever. And then the goose was like, my friends are not here. So, I mean, a frozen lake with a Canadian goose in April, I don't know how much more Canadian you can get.
That is true. And remember, goose friends, always RRSP.
What?
Goose friends.
RRSP? RSVP?
RSVP.
RRSP.
I was thinking of RRSPs.
Oh, the financial planning tool.
Yikes. But geese, you should also financially plan with RRSPs. Although I suppose for a goose, it would be like GRSPs. Okay. Don't even worry about that. I looked it up. And in Canada, according to my very scant research, the average Canadian can name around 30 celebrities. And I thought that was interesting because the reason we're doing this episode is, you will have noticed, fans of Dancing with Damage, that we start our intro with saying that Abby is your resident author. Hello, Abby.
Hello.
She still is your resident author, and I'm your resident philosopher. So one thing Abby and I have noticed, particularly it's very much me, I'll take the blame on this. This is an episode I wanted to do because it's something that my dad brought up to me a while ago. It was something he noticed. Now my dad, he's passed away, but he was an old guy before he passed away. All right, this guy was from the 50s.
He was born old.
He was born old, barely from the 50s, probably the soul of someone from the like 1850s. And one thing he would always say to me, and I did some fact checking, it seems to pan out, is that, well, he was obsessed with Scotland.
Yeah.
Big thing about him was he loved that era of history, like Scottish and England history in like the 13, 14, 15, 16, 1700s. Loved that stuff. I don't really know what that's called. Is there an era? It's not like...
I don't know. I'm literally British and I do not know.
It was like the monarchy era or something, whatever.
Regency?
It was, that sounds right. Let's just go with that. If you're looking for a name, by the way, you can have that one for free. Although I'm pretty sure, whatever, it's got some name.
I didn't make that up.
Oh, no?
No, it's definitely a name people use. I just don't know if it's correctly applied.
Okay. We're not inspiring a lot of confidence so far.
I'm not a historian. I've never claimed to be one.
And I'm not a goose, and yet here we were.
So the point of what you're saying.
Oh, yeah. So he was always telling me, and I looked it up, Scotland kind of had the first public universities. This was a big thing. There's sort of a theory, and there's some books about it, how Scotland sort of invented the modern world. Actually, that's a book. And he always used to talk about it. I could see it whenever I would go into his various studies or rooms or whatever. He loved that book. And so the idea was that Scotland was sort of the intellectual center, well, around the Industrial Revolution. And often I would hear stories from this book about how in these public universities, these young, bright minds who would then go from Scotland out into the different major cities of the world, like Paris and Madrid and whatever, how they would be arguing about different philosophies like Kant and Descartes and Voltaire and Hume and Locke.
Socrates, Plato.
There was a lot of, in particular, at that time, in those centuries, there were a lot of philosophers we can name now whose thinkings, Smith, these types of people, whose thinkings seem to have an impact on how societies developed. Just so. And you can really think of it like a farmer's field. So at that time, it seems that because of all these thinkers that were coming forward with theories about society and how it should look, that it's like a farmer's field. So the farmer plants the crops, but then has to decide when to water them, how much to water them, what fertilizer to use potentially, whether they should put up scarecrows or whatever, all these things that can affect the growth of the crops. And so all these philosophies were like those different things that the farmer could do that turned into the constitutions and the ideas that we have in developed countries. Of course, there's also the element of religion that was woven in, et cetera, et cetera. But my point is, at that time, there wasn't really Hollywood back then at all. So when people were talking about celebrities, i.e. people who would be mugged in the streets, not mugged, mobbed.
That took a turn.
Yikes. I mean, yeah, no, let's not mug anybody. And even mobbing them.
It's still not okay.
It seems kind of mean. But what I'm getting at is, it seems for the first time in history, in the last little bit, since the advent of screen technology and sort of the widespread social media era too, like Abby, we talked about last episode, is that we have people turning entertainers into celebrities instead of people who can have a more profound impact on the crops, and they are no longer celebrities. I looked it up, and apparently the average Canadian, and this may be different from country to country, but can only name about 5 thinkers that they're aware of, and they're all dead. They're all like Socrates, Plato, Darwin,
Aristotle.
Yeah. And, what the average Canadian could say about the thoughts that those people had or the theories they had is pretty dubious too. So isn't that, Abby, do you think that's a strange balance, like being able to name 30 people who are entertainers who just kind of are able to act and make us laugh, and versus naming 5 people that we don't really know what they did, we just know they were important?
I think my answer is twofold. The first, it sort of shows and reflects the priorities of people nowadays. I feel like with the rise of damage, a lot of people don't care so much about the future, not even the future of humanity, but their future. They just care about instant gratification and the now and trying to escape from the now. So that explains why they like celebrities. But I also think it is glorifying a life you wish you had. So while I will not deny that if you're up at 4 or 5 a.m. and you're filming till 8, 9, 10 p.m. every day and you're only getting about 4 hours of sleep and some physical stunts are very hard on the body, overall, acting is considered to be one of the cushier jobs people can have. Yes, you get yelled at. Yes, you have to say things a certain way and take things 17 times and memorize so many words. But the amount of pay that is associated with these jobs is very high. And the amount of prestige and the amount of free things people are given and the opportunities to have brand deals, which from my understanding nowadays is one of the most lucrative ways to exist. You're basically a commercial and you're like, I like this product and people like me. So you're gonna buy this product because you like me. So I think people, A, like celebrities because they appreciate the escapism, but B, really want the lives of celebrities. They want to be on the big screen, the silver screen. They want to, act alongside some very attractive people who are well known to increase their social value. They want to make lots of money, have a nice house, have a nice car, have the ability to find a partner who is creme de la creme. So that is my understanding. What is yours?
I found a creme partner.
Aw. Creme de la creme or just creme?
Creme de la creme brulee.
I don't even know what that means.
Delish.
Delish.
We don't know for sure. Yeah, you said the silver screen, and that puts me in mind of, I didn't really flesh out my metaphor of the farm very well. So in the metaphor of the farm, the crops that are growing are like the next generation of a society.
I did get that, but I agree. You could have fleshed it out more, but I did understand what you were getting at.
That's right. Well, you haven't even heard about the tinsel yet. So
I don't think you mentioned tinsel.
You see what I'm saying?
I have a weird love of tinsel. Growing up, when I was really little, like in the 90s, my parents used to decorate for Christmas using a lot of tinsel before society decided that was really bad for the environment. And I just have memories of tinsel everywhere, and it makes me excited for Christmas. It's a weird Pavlovian correlation.
Great. Well, you're going to love this. So the crops represent the next generation of a society, and the farmers represent the current sort of, I use adult
Loosely?
Yeah. The current generation in power, because I think it's safe to say that between the ages of 25 and 75, that's the age where people can make, and generally make the biggest difference in society. Obviously, there are outliers who are younger or older. David Suzuki, I think, is like 90.
David Attenborough's 90. I don't know how old David Suzuki is.
He's getting there. And then there are that Greta Thunberg is a young person. I'm not sure if she's over 25 or not, but certainly when she came into the media's eye,
she was a young teenager, I believe.
Quite young. But apart from that, generally, 25 to 75, that's your time to make hay because the sun is shining in that sense. But anyway, so the farmers are that age of majority, age of influence. And they're deciding how to raise the crops. But instead of discussing the best nitrogen to put in the soil or the best crop rotation to do or how to harvest or how to weed.
Or prune.
Prune. Except if you're growing prunes. Can you prune a prune?
You can.
Oh, she was in farming, so she will know. But instead of that, the farmers are talking about, what the best kind of tinsel to put on it, or like...
Oh, to scare away the birds?
Oh yeah, that would actually work. No, they're talking about like the best Christmas lights to put around it, or the best colors to make the fence, or, just things that aren't going to influence the crops. And that's sort of like how a lot of our time is spent hearing from and looking at and thinking about celebrities. And that's why the average Canadian can name so many and even give you details of their lives, potentially, or their movie history, and be interested in what they have to say if they're interviewing on the radio or something like that, but only can think of 5 dead thinkers.
Yeah, that's true. And at first I was having flashbacks to all the grape farms where they have tinsel literally along the vines to try to scare away the birds. And I thought, man, this is a deep metaphor. But I like what you're saying, and I do agree. I think just through living, you end up learning about celebrities because news articles so frequently say things, and if you watch news, that you just end up seeing headlines that say things about celebrities' lives, but I very rarely see or hear anything about somebody who's trying to make a positive impact. And I like what you're saying, that instead of caring about the quality of the crops that they grow healthy, strong, and become useful, we care more about decorating the farm so it looks pretty and totally ignoring the fact that we're supposed to be growing food.
Thank goodness she's here, because that is what I wanted to say. You just ignore that part about the tinsel that backfired on me.
I like tinsel, it's okay.
The tinsel often backfires in real life because you decorate with it and then you can never clean it up.
No, it gets little stringies everywhere. Yeah, but the 1990s were a wild time, guys. Like, you gotta remember, environmental understanding was lower and tinsel love was higher.
Yikes. Tinseltown. So, where am I going with this? The Social Blueprint is the book that Abby and I wrote. And in it we talk about, in chapter 2, the farmer and the barn, the idea that if enough individual people are damaged through the phenomenon of unmoderated technology and the wings of love being clipped, then the planks of the barn and the wood of the barn, that is society, becomes too rotten to hold up the structure, and the whole structure collapses. And we can see signs of this in what we're talking about today. The idealizing and the interest and the prioritizing of celebrities and the worship of celebrities and the perceived importance of celebrities. Whereas Abby rightly put it, that's like the decoration on a barn, versus thinkers who throughout history, like thinkers and leaders, I think it's safe to say, like those who are going to influence the crops. And that's another thing I looked up. Not many people in Canada can name more than 5 world leaders either, which is, it's not a slight. I'm not casting aspersions on that generation. It's just that, as Abby pointed out, the blanket of damage has become so heavy and so prevalent that the priorities of that generation have just totally misaligned.
Yeah, it's really sad. So my perspective of it is you sort of become what you associate with. You've heard that before, probably. Mm-hmm. So if everyone is spending all this time focusing on the most beautiful, the most handsome, the most financially well off, unfortunately, the people in those positions of power, perceived social power, often do not have a substance behind them that is worthy of such accolades. And I'm not saying they can't act. I'm not saying they're not very attractive and they're not great at selling things. I'm saying that these people often don't have a plan to help the world. They're not bringing attention to serious problems in society. And some of them do in limited capacities. They do put their support behind a charity, which is positive. But it would be more positive if somebody who had a plan, who said, this is the problem with society, this is my plan to fix society, like world leaders, it would be positive if they had more attention and adoration brought to them, because the more people care, the more people are willing to do something about it. And the thing is, when you have a plan, if nobody is willing to work with you to flesh out that plan, then the plan is not going to happen. It's like trying to make a surprise party for somebody. You need someone to bring the food and someone to get the decorations and someone to yell surprise and someone to distract the birthday person and a location that you have access to that the person will come to at a specific time. There's a lot of moving parts. You can't by yourself set up a surprise party, get the person to come and then just yell surprise at them when you open the door by yourself. That's really weird. Maybe they'd like that, but it's not the goal. So if a leader or someone with knowledge and power and the ability to deal with these problems and actually solve problems in society is given the podium and everyone cares and is invested in their life and what they're doing, then all of a sudden our resources and our mental, social, and our volunteer abilities are all going to support this plan. And all of a sudden society is becoming better and we have less roadblocks towards making progress in a positive direction. Whereas now, a lot of people, because celebrities unfortunately are often not qualified to have that position of power or to do something to help society, we are putting our energy towards just buying whatever they're trying to sell us, because that is essentially their job. Outside of acting, usually they're just selling us stuff. So now we have a society hyper-focused on consumerism, hyper-focused on just buying or adoring whatever the celebrity says, but it's not helping anybody. We're wasting valuable attention.
That's very well said. You know, a telescope can only look one direction at once. It has a very narrow focus. And so this damaged society has focused the telescope in a very strange place. But, you know, Abby says a true thing, and I want to go back to it. You know, the word power, the power to do something. We often hear the power to help or the power to do something. It was defined, I heard it in undergrad, and it kind of stuck with me, the definition that someone allotted power. So I'm going to use it here. The idea of power was the ability to make someone's thoughts into reality or someone's wishes into reality.
That's cool. I like that.
That was the definition of power. But in terms of the power to help society or to improve society, like to make those crops we were talking about earlier grow, I agree with you that there's a lot of world leaders and a lot of celebrities who don't truly have power, because they might have many resources, but that might be like someone who comes up to the farm and says, I want to help water your plants. I have 17 swimming pools full of paint. Will this assist you? And the farmer's going to have to say, well, it's very pretty,
We could paint the barn, but it's not going to help the crops.
It's not going to help the crops. Indeed, the only person with power in that scenario was someone with water. But for example, President Trump, we'll go back to him because he's very notorious right now. We've talked a little bit about him, but he's such a perfect example of someone who has power, but not true power. He can make many of his wishes into reality because now he's known as a wealthy person, someone with a military he can command, influence in terms of messaging and that sort of thing. So he has all that power. He has all that paint. But because he's so damaged, he has not one drop of water.
He can't actually do anything positive.
That's right. That is the curse of damage. It makes it so the ability to actually benefit the crops is gone. And it's a very sad fate. And the same is true with the celebrities that we worship nowadays, is generally these are people who don't have a lot of water to offer. And that's no insult to them. To have that water, you really have to have a specific vision. Like those thinkers we were talking about, like David Suzuki, we mentioned him, David Attenborough, these kinds of people.
Huge fan of the Davids.
And, you know, anybody who champions a cause and not entertainment, those are the people with water. And the reason I wanted to talk about it this episode, bringing it back to what I said about calling myself a resident philosopher, is I would like, and Abby and I would both like, to offer ourselves as sort of people who you might want to talk about or
just share the messages in the book. Just share the ideas.
Yeah, I'm like, talk about, and then that's it. You have nothing to talk about because I've stopped talking. If people who you support, online, especially through social media, are not people who seem to have the best interests of society in mind, then what we're left with is a lot of the, and I'm going to put thinkers in quotation here, we see a lot of these kind of right-wing or very polarizing figures who are doing podcasts all the time.
Manosphere type stuff. Old mind, like it's good if a woman listens to her man and does things for him, stays at home and raises the kids, but that's sort of the vibe you get. And very like cryptocurrency, bro, and everyone should have guns and shoot all the other people. Not the kind of messaging that is super helpful for society.
Yeah, so look, I'm not going to disagree with anything that demographic is putting out there. I do applaud anybody who is trying to put out a message about how to improve society, because I'm sure in his heart of hearts, or at least in his mind, thinks that what he's saying is helpful, and if everyone just did that, things would be better. There's a few problems with that. There's two.
A few is two.
And this is why we really hope that the Social Blueprint or other plans like it get a little more attention, because they're founded on logic. And so the problem with a lot of these polarized, and they typically tend to be right-wing ideologies, is if you poke them with the stick of logic for even like a heartbeat, they tend to just fall apart very quickly. They're not supported by the scientific community or common human experience. We see, for example, in Canada, the majority of people in what many people call the professional grade schools, like medical school, law school, these kind of things, now the majority tends to be female. Or another example, when females and males are given social tests to test EQ, emotional quotient, or sort of intrapersonal skills, females typically tend to score higher. And so the idea of relegating that gender, which is actually proving to be very well suited to important work, and say, well, they should
only be allowed to pick one path.
That's right. And of course, Abby, some people from each gender will choose to be housekeepers.
Yeah, I mean, it's valuable, necessary, important work. It is hard work, but it is important work. And the issue is not pursuing that line of work. The issue is having that line of work thrust upon you and you have no additional options. It's sort of like the idea of having kids. You know, we do not have children and we have various reasons for that. But it would be like if once you reach a certain age, you were forced to have children. That's not fair. Some people, it just doesn't work in their lives. Some people don't want kids. There's a lot of reasons, and you shouldn't have to defend those to anybody, but it would sort of be like forcing people to have children because you've reached a certain age, and that's not fair. You can't force a lifestyle upon somebody. You should have the right to choose a lifestyle that suits you best and what you can best do to support society and make it a better place. So relegating women to only being homemakers is wrong. Allowing them to be, if they choose to, is great.
I think I said housekeepers before. That is a separate trade. Homemakers, that is the word I was looking for. So again, if you take these far right polarizing philosophies that are gaining traction right now and you just poke them a little bit with any kind of scientific
stick,
it falls apart. But the other problem I have, and this is the bigger one with those kind of philosophies, is that they've been tried and have been shown to be bad. The example would be like, again, we'll take our farming example. Okay, let's say the crops are not growing well, as they are now. And some of the farmers say, you know what? I've got it. One farmer says, oh, actually, why don't we try more nitrogen in the ground? Or why don't we try to water them less when it's sunny because it's burning the leaves, or so forth. And the other farmer says, I have an idea. Let's sacrifice a goat every full moon, and we'll paint its blood on everything, and we'll jump around, and that will appease the gods, and that will make our crops grow. So sacrificing to improve your crops was a common practice, a long time ago. And we know it doesn't do anything because the poor goat, first of all, and second of all, the corn doesn't care about the goat. No one cares about the goat. The goat, poor goat, unloved, dead goat.
It's too dark.
It's very dark, but my point is to revivify philosophies that A, don't stand up to even the merest scrutiny, and B, are just tired, is what we're seeing resurging right now. And it's normal. When the crops are starting to fail, people will turn outside of the mainstream thinking. And that is why it's important that if you are aware of a plan to address social issues that doesn't involve, as I say, tired or outdated or tenuous.
I was going to say scientifically proven to be inaccurate or unfounded.
And even if it's not scientific, even if it just goes against your common experience, it's important that other plans rise up to challenge them so that when the next generation is looking for answers, they don't only have these very poor and rather lazy plans to turn to.
It's like in soccer, in the Premier League. All the teams compete against each other over many games, over several months to see who is the best. It's not like Man City just gets to sit off at the sidelines and then at the championship match, they're just like, okay, I'm gonna fight whoever got here. I automatically qualify as being the best. You have to test the mettle. You have to prove time and time again, season after season, that you're still one of the top teams. And if for some reason you don't play well and your players are bad for some reason or they're not working as a team, then you don't get the top spot. You don't deserve to. And the point of logic and the point of understanding is that you should always be questioning your belief system. You should always be questioning your philosophies and say, okay, I believed this then. It has merit, it has value, but new information has come about. How does that test against what I believe? How does this change or modify what I believe? Does it change anything? But you have to ask the question, because if you never challenge your beliefs, you would still be firmly in the camp of maybe that Barney the dinosaur is a friend to everybody, and that if you know your ABCs, then that's all you need to know. And you go to your first job and you're like, well, I can sing a bunch of songs, but I never learned how to read. I never learned how to count past 10. I never learned how to have a conversation about an adult topic beyond like, that bunny is cute. Barney has some good essence and he's good for the young people, but once you get past a certain age, you need to evolve in your interests and in your understanding and in what you focus on.
Yeah, that's well said. Or you could think of it like, we go to a restaurant and you look at the menu and you've tried a few of the main dishes, you really don't like them, and the only one left is like squid ink burger, and you're like, ugh. Well, let's try. Better if there's other things on the menu to choose from that might be delicious. One more example before we go, and I hate to give it any weight by discussing it, but a lot of the new, especially in the States, and I think it's going to creep into Canada and other developed countries, is the idea of reverting or reviving the debate about abortion, just to shine a flashlight on what I mean about it being tired and lazy, that kind of rhetoric. So for a long time, abortion has been lawful, has been used safely and where necessary. It's got a good track record. There's not been any issues with it. But now it's become a topic. And this is one of those, if you just poke it just for a second, you can see how lazy it is to raise that as a philosophy. For example, abortion, I think the biggest criticism against it by sort of a lot of right-wing thinkers, I'll put that in quote, because I think it's very lazy, is that it's murder. And that's essentially a biblical, I don't know what testament, it's certainly not the New Testament. It's not anything Jesus said. I've read it back to front what Jesus said. He didn't say anything about abortions, by the way. Well, there is thou shalt not kill. So maybe it's derived from there. But again, we cover this in the Social Blueprint, the 5 fears of death, the reasons one should fear death. And so the first reason that it is lazy to raise abortion as a social issue nowadays is that the 5 fears of death are not engaged with a fetus. And then number 2, in terms of the scientific data on safety of abortions versus safety of birth, it's actually much safer to abort than it is to bring a baby to term and give birth. And number 3, if you consider how, and I'm not saying people should or shouldn't get abortions, but a positive aspect of abortions is that the world is overpopulated. The scientific community has said, look, there's too many people. They gave us a warning to humanity about that in the 90s. They reiterated it a couple of years ago, essentially saying society is going to not be sustainable or is already unsustainable because there's just too many people. And so an abortion is helpful in that sense. And so for these 3 reasons, abortions can be the right choice.
Just because you have the right to choose something doesn't mean you will. Every day, students have the right to study lots and lots and lots to get straight A's in their class. They have the capacity to do well. Most of them are studying the night before. Mm-hmm. They don't choose to take that right. And that is a very low stakes, high reward situation. There is no woman in the world who would take the idea of abortion lightly. It's not possible. Every argument that you could raise as to why a woman should not make that choice, she has already thought of 10 times over. If she's still willing to get to that point, something severe is going on in her life. And you saying she should not have the right to make that choice is just, shut up. No one should have the right to tell you what to do with your body and your future. Is it better to force someone who may have made a mistake, maybe used protection and it didn't work for some reason, maybe was in a very dangerous situation? There's lots of reasons why someone could end up with a pregnancy that they don't want or didn't expect or never planned for. And to force a woman to come to term with a child doesn't necessarily mean it's a better situation, because the fetus could be inviable, and that could be a very short, painful life for the child. It could be put up for adoption and never be adopted and go into the foster care system in a very negative situation, and that child could grow up in a very negative situation. The parent could have a lot of resentment towards the child, which we have seen in our personal lives, where the parent felt they had to keep the child for religious or other reasons, and then spent their whole life resenting the child and often turning to substances. And the child had a very negative upbringing because they could feel their parent kind of hated them. And there's nothing they could do. It wasn't their fault. So it is wrong to tell people they shouldn't have a viable choice. So we will say that. We'll just say that. It is wrong to take that away, because what are you trying to prove? If you're so against murder, why don't we all collectively go band together to find the 300 people plus on the most wanted list in Canada and the States and bring them to justice? They've been out for years. Why don't we try to find those people? Or why don't we, I don't know, try to have gun legislation in the States to stop people shooting each other, and small kids accidentally shooting each other because their parents loaded firearms are accessible. This happens at least once a quarter. So why don't we, if we're so worried about murder, do something about guns? How's that? Is that a good idea?
I mean, it certainly could be a topic for the next episode. I was thinking more that perhaps, if you look at the States, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of people die from lung cancer, from cigarettes, but I don't hear the same vitriol against tobacco companies from certain right-wing thinkers, which arguably are creating the deaths of many more people than abortions would. And again, if we look at the 5 fears of death, they're actually more strongly engaged in people who die from lung cancer for the suffering and for the dependence they leave behind and the social bonds they've created, all the reasons. So I won't get into it, but yeah, we could round up, what did you say the most 300 wanted? We could get a posse. Yes, we could all get a posse. We could have horses. I could ride a llama.
Yeah.
And we will charge into the Wild West and we will round up those villains. But no, I mean, Abby is right. There's other energies that would take. If your only argument is killing is wrong, then abortion, it just doesn't even make the cut.
It's not even on the list.
For either of those definitions. And so again, what I'm saying is, and the topic of this episode is celebrities, is that we've noticed, and I wanted to just speak out about, how we can see how damaged our developed society is when the spotlight or the telescope has shifted to entertainment, the color of the fence, the color of the barn, whatever, versus thinking about how to make the crops grow, thinkers. And then where the telescope does swivel occasionally to thinkers, we see a lot of very...
antiquated.
Yeah. I don't want to say dangerous, just very lazy, as I say, and poorly constructed. And that's really not fair to human civilization if those are the ideas and the messages we're focusing on. So again, what I'm trying to say is thank you for checking out the Social Blueprint and for talking about it or even thinking about it. Any engagement you can do with the Social Blueprint, we really appreciate it because of what we've been talking about. How can the next generation get something good off the menu if all that's there is
squid ink?
Yeah, like eventually you just stop going to the restaurant, and that's very sad. And that's what we see a lot about TikTok and Instagram, and there's not even messaging there really anymore. It's just pure dopamine chemical reactions. And I don't blame these young people from turning away from conventional messaging. So let's try and bring it back. I think that is possible. As we talked about in the Social Blueprint, the rat is in the corner. It has a chance to turn and fight its attackers because quality of life is slipping because of unmoderated technology. And so now is the time. In your life, you want to achieve a purpose. You want to leave the farm better than when you found it. And we hope the Social Blueprint, if you're looking for a way to direct your ship, we hope that can be a rudder for you.
So thanks for hanging out with us, and we hope you guys have a great day.